Hello and welcome to Bottom Feeders Co-op Incorporated. This is Matty77, and today I'd just like to talk a little bit about my games of the year. 5 of them. I don't usually have a very long list. I mean, I play a lot of games in a year, and I like a lot of them, but for me, a game of the year is going to have something that really sets them above. So I'm not someone that fills out a list of 10 just to fill out a list of 10. Gonna start off with the 5 and 4 are kind of together, which is the Williams pinball packs from Zen. Oh, get past this little sound here. Footage is from Dead Cells. That was a run from the very beginning. So I haven't played in a while and I just wanted to get back into the hang of it. But anyways, yeah, the Williams pinball packs with classic Williams tables. They used to be tables in Pinball Arcade. If you own them, you still have them. Because Farsight used to have the license. And they lost the license. I don't know exactly how. There was a lot of different speculation about it. I don't know if Zen had already made moves with Williams. I don't know if it was because of the whole Nintendo controversy when they put games on the Switch that they didn't have the rights to. But at the end of the day, Farsight lost the rights to the Williams licenses. And Zen picked them up. And at first I was a little worried. I love Zen Pinball. Anybody who knows anything about me knows that I love pinball in general, and I love Zen Pinball in particular. Pretty big fan of their pinball tables. But they definitely have a more video game, unrealistic physics engine. And I was a little worried about what they were going to do with the real tables. I didn't expect them to be bad. I just didn't know if I could expect them to be based in realism. But they eventually put out the Fishtails free table, and they put out stuff on Steam so that people could try them and they could get feedback and tinker things, and they've come out with pretty damn good realistic physics engine. Is it perfect? No. But it's as good, if not better, than Farsight's model. And the presentation is better than Farsight's. And I also have to say, as someone who's dealt with both companies, Zen has a much, much better customer support, and they listen to their audience and fan base a lot better than Farsight does. That's just my personal opinion, but my experience with them is that they definitely have a better rapport with their consumer base. The tables themselves, the Williams Pack 1, which is my number 5 choice, is, well, they had the free Fishtails table, they had the Junkyard, which is, to me, the stinker. I'm not a big fan of Junkyard, but, you always get a stinker in them table packs, regardless of which company, what the tables are, in my opinion. You always get that one. And for me, it was Junkyard. But what we did get was we got the Getaway High Speed 2, which is a Ritchie table. Usually have fast tracks. Hard to keep the ball going, but if you can and can keep it going quick, you can really rack up some points. There's 2 Ritchies, actually. They're brothers. I forget their first names, but either one of their tables are usually right up there for me when it comes to pinball design. And then you also had Medieval Madness, which is, I don't know, considered one of the better tables of all time. It's not necessarily one of my favorites, but I can see why people love it. I've put some time into it. I put more than enough time into it in both the Pinball Arcade and in Zen's. I've never played a real machine of that. fact, what I'd like to see, Farsight did have it, one of them, and I'd love to see Zen get a hold of it, is my favorite machine that I've actually played the most in real life was the Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I'd love to see a Zen version of it now that I know what they're doing with the Williams tables and what their physics engine is. And then we move on to the second table pack, which is my number 4 choice for the year. And that has Attack from Mars, which is definitely one of my favorite tables ever. Have played the real table and know that table by heart. I'm still getting used to the differences in the physics engine, but it's just one of the best tables ever, if not the best. I don't know it like I know Dracula, but it's probably a more solid table at the end of the day. And you have the Black Rose table, which is also, in my opinion, one of the best tables ever made. It's tricky, and it was funny seeing quite a few of the people that I communicate with about pinball not really enjoying it, but it takes a little. It's a tricky table. But once you figure out what you're doing with it and where you need to be hitting your shots, it's actually rather nice. And it has Party Zone. That's like I said, every pack has a stinker. And those are my 4th and 5th picks. Nothing too exciting, nothing wild. A lot of people probably surprised that it's DLC, but excuse me, I don't count that against it. It's not like a DLC pack or an expansion. Though expansions can, I don't know, I have mixed feelings on that. But with pinball, it's a little different. It's not an expansion like more story to another game. It's new tables, and anyone who plays any amount of pinball knows that pinball tables are a game to themselves. Every single one is their own special thing. And in each of those packs, you have 3 tables plus the free Fishtails table. So that's 7 games right there. So that's not a bad thing at all, and I don't think that it's cheating to do those packs as entries in my Game of the Year list. Which brings us to number 3. Okay, now this is cheating because it's a remaster. Normally I don't like seeing remasters or re-releases on Game of the Year lists, but this really deserves special mention. And that's Shadow of the Colossus. I don't buy many new games. I usually wait till I can get a package with all content and know that I'm getting all the material in one place. But not only did I know there was not going to be extra content, but it's Shadow of the Colossus. That's one of my favorite games of all time. That's on my top 10 list of all time. That's going back to my other series is at Ark. That's the game that made me see that games could reach the level of art, could be more than just something to play and have fun with. And it's also something that's defined how I think games should tell story through the gameplay versus cutscenes and taking control from you. And they put some of the most beautiful graphics ever on that game. The base game is still pretty much the same. Let's get that out of the way. If you're looking for a revamped camera or a really great new way of controlling Wander and Agro, and new weak spots on the, or change ups on the Colossuses, none of that's there. It's the same base game. If you've played Shadow of the Colossus, you know Shadow of the Colossus, you can pick this up and start running right through it. What it does bigger is the PS2 version was really, really, really ambitious, and it ran at like 15-20 frames per second a lot of the time. Like, it just technically couldn't handle what it was doing, and it looked good, but there was a lot of minimalism and fog effects. And I know that a lot of people argued against the remake with, well, it was a design choice, but I think it was more like technical limitations. It worked in their favor, but it was technical limitations. And it was like The original was almost like seeing a painting of a scene, whereas the remake is the scene. Graphically, that is. Again, the base gameplay is the same. I'm not gonna make it sound like it totally revamps or renews the concept. It's the same game, but it finally looks and performs the way it should have. And I know there's the PS3 remaster, and that does play okay. Beyond the fact that, first off, they use the European controls, I guess, on code or whatever, so there's an issue with the grip meter that didn't exist with the original PS2 release, at least in North America. But more than that, it performed better than the PS2 version, but by performing better and being on a better hardware, you started to see where some of those, as I said before, some of those were not artistic choices. They were technical limitations, and once you have a system that's not hampered by those, I don't know, I felt a lot of people talk about the remaster like it's great. I thought it looked washed out, kind of dead. I'm not a huge fan of it. I played a lot of it because it performed, and the original game didn't perform, and it's one of my favorite games, but I didn't really care for how it looked, and this fixes that. It brings it into the modern era. It's mostly if you've never played Shadow before, you owe it to yourself to try it and play this version. Don't look for original hardware. Don't be one of these, I've got to play no, play this. It's the same exact game. It just looks the way it always should have. It performs the way it should have always performed. And with it belonged on my list, I felt. It needed recognition for that, for actually bringing a classic of the hobby to not only to the now, but also finally in a way that it performs the way it should have performed from the beginning, the way they wanted it to perform from the beginning. But even though it's changed a little because Blue Point did it, it's almost like it's the original vision. This is what they envisioned when they originally made it. Number 2, that's the footage we're watching. Number 2 is Dead Cells. I like the roguelike genre. I play a lot of them. Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon. I was just playing Brutal recently. I might do a video on that. It's not too bad. But I like that. The whole, you die, you permadeath, but then you go back to the beginning and either you've unlocked some stuff or you've progressed somewhat. I like these games. I like arcade games. I mean, I like twin shooters. House Mox games. I'm a House Mox fanboy, if you know their stuff. Like Next Machina is one of my favorite games of last year. That was on my list last year. I think it was last year. But I like these kind of games. Arcade type experiences. And this particular type I like because for the same reason I like Dark Souls. It's the learning, the insurmountable challenge that you get to the point where that wasn't such a challenge anymore. Like, I wouldn't say this run is on screen is great, but like I said, I deleted all save. Well, not. I went to a save slot that was empty and started from the very beginning. When I first played this game, I didn't get this far. I didn't open nothing. And now I can do this, and this is rusty. I can get past the first boss. I don't in this run. I think I die to him. But I have gotten to the point. I can get pretty far. I haven't beaten it yet. But I don't feel it's the type of game you need to beat to be able to have a real opinion on it. You know the loop. And I've seen most of what there is to see. I just haven't completed it yet. Same as Gungeon. I haven't completed Gungeon yet. It's just real hard. These games are not easy. But I like the gameplay loop. I like the fluidity. And part of the note with this one is it reminds me of as someone who's a little older, 41, grew up with Atari and NES. It reminds me of the best of the NES and Super NES, Genesis, Master System era side-scrolling action games, but animated so beautifully. It's one of those games. It looks, people look at it and go, oh, it's just that retro stuff, but it's not really. I mean, it uses the pixels, it's got the look, but at the same time, they could not have done this on a Super Nintendo or a Genesis. There's no way. It's kind of like when I was talking about my third pick. It's like, these are what we imagined games looking like when we were playing them back then. This is what our brains were seeing, even though we weren't. The games did not look like this, but this is what we were picturing, and finally technology's gotten to the point that they actually look that way. And that's the thing, it takes the best of an era I have some nostalgia for, I'll be honest about that, and that I really liked and I grew up with, and it merges it with a lot of gameplay style and techniques I like of today, and it takes it all and it puts it in a beautiful pixel animation, and it's just a good looking game. It's a good playing game. I mean, if you look at the footage on screen, just you can move. You couldn't move like that on a Super Nintendo or a Genesis. And you're rolling, you gotta, well, I got hit there, but you gotta dodge roll, and you sword just swings, and I'm not really using any secondaries here in this particular footage, but you know, you got your bow, you got your, well, there's different secondaries you can have, but you know, it's all about turrets. If you've played the game, it's all about turrets. Personally, I like to pair it with a wolf trap. That way I can get some sword hits in from the back while the turrets are hitting from the front, at least on bosses. But yeah, it's a beautiful game. And it's original too. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of roguelikes out there. This one, it does its own thing. It's got an interesting world. It's got an interesting in-game reason for why you can keep starting over and over from the beginning. It's not just fuzzy logic. There's within-game reason why you can keep coming back and starting over and over again. And that is my second favorite game of the year. And that brings us to 1. And I thought Dead Cells was going to be my 1 this year. I didn't get to the next game till very late in the year. And I got it at the library. I did not purchase it. I would like to purchase it now, but it's just still too expensive for me. I don't have the money. It's why money I have usually goes into services, because I don't have the money to be buying $60 games all the time. But my number 1 game, and if you've been following the Game of the Year season, it's not going to surprise you. It's God of War. God of War is amazing. It's really, really good. Starting with the gameplay, they, again, and this seems to be a theme on my list, is modernization or updating of systems and controls and how things play. But they take the old God of War games. They were Babby's first character action game. They were kind of like character action games with combos, but they were built around set pieces and allowing people that weren't as skilled to do it with the square, square, triangle, square, square, triangle. You know, you didn't have to think about it the way you did with DMC or Bayonetta. You just square, square, triangle. Yeah, if you were good, you could put time into learning all the other stuff and do some really impressive looking things, but that guy that couldn't play character action games could play God of War, and it focused on big set pieces. And they changed that, but they didn't get rid of it. It's still there in the DNA, and when you're playing, you can see that. You can see that desire for Kratos to start comboing out. You can juggle. It definitely keeps an aspect of that. It does not pretend that its identity is completely different. But they marry it to a different viewpoint and a control system that feels a lot more like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, which gives the combat just more immediacy and brutality that the original games didn't have. And before I played it, I played through all the old games this year. So this isn't memory, this is recency, this is something I've just recently done. And for all the set piece and fun of the original games, the combat always lacked a weight. And this doesn't. When you hit something in this, you feel that you hit something. Plus, it gives Kratos one of the best weapons I've ever seen in video games, the Axe of Leviathan. And that thing's awesome. It feels good. It is a great attack. You can throw it, you can bring it back to you. But it feels good. That's the biggest thing. I mean, I could go on, and I'm sure a lot of other people already have about what the combat does right, what it does wrong. But for me, it was just feel. I felt like I was there. It just gave me an immediacy and a tactile feedback that made me feel like there was more going on. The big flaw, I'll get it out of the way now, and this of course has been discussed a lot of places, is the added RPG type elements. Yeah, it was a flaw. The game didn't need that, but you know what? It didn't really hurt anything either. Like, they were light enough, you can mostly ignore them. So even though it is a flaw, I'm not holding it against the game. It's kind of a semi-open world. It's pretty linear, but there is explorable stuff. But the bigger thing is, they finally made Kratos a character I could give a crap about. Like I said, I played through all the original games, and Kratos was the epitome of, when people talk about toxic masculinity, not to get into politics, like, no matter what your feelings are, your politics are, if you want to know what toxic masculinity is, it is Kratos. Kratos is the dictionary definition. I am mad guy. I do something because I'm mad, and all I can only reach out with anger. And I cause my own problem, but it can't be my problem because I am big man. It must be your problem, so I will solve it by hurting you with my anger. Like, he's just such a one-note character that has no redeeming value whatsoever. Causes all his own problems, but can't ever take responsibility for it. And they changed that in this. I'm not going to get deep into the story. There's all kinds of criticisms out there and critiques, and there's people that talk good about it and bad about it. And plus, I don't want to get too much into it because I know all the Norse mythology. I saw a lot of the twists coming, and it would be hard for me to talk about it without talking about those twists. But suffice it to say, the biggest change in Kratos, and this is part of what made me love the game, is he took responsibility for once in his life. It's not that he becomes sympathetic. It's not that he becomes a nice guy. He's still a really fractured individual. He still spends half the game. Like, that's the thing. He spends half the game screwing his kid up. But unlike every other installment, instead of blaming somebody and going out and killing them for it, he takes responsibility and finally gets, oh, I caused this problem. And it made me actually care to see what happens next with the guy. If a new God of War comes out, it's going to be right on top of my list, and it'll probably be a day one purchase, especially knowing in this, I think in this day and age, it needs to be noted, the game has no microtransactions, it has no DLC other than a couple of pre-order shields. They shipped one complete game. It's all there. You buy the game, you have the game. You don't have to buy extra stuff. You don't have to wait for the next installment of the it's all there. And in an era where there aren't many complete games being released anymore, that's a very, very special thing. So I will buy the next one, and I will probably day one it. But that is definitely my favorite game of the year. So just to go back over it, number 5 was the Williams Pinball Pack, Table Pack number 1. Number 4 was the Williams Table Pack number 2. My third favorite game of the year was Shadow of the Colossus. Again, great game. Same game, but it looks and plays like you always wanted it to. Number 2 is what we're watching on screen, Dead Cells. One of the best roguelites to come out in the last couple of years. One of the best indie games to come out in the last couple of years. And my number 1, and not a surprise, and it's not really a unpopular pick, but it deserves it, is God of War. Definitely the best game I played all year was God of War. I don't really have much else to say about it. Just, I'm not one of these people that hops, but if you happen across this video and you liked it, I could use some subscribers. If you want to subscribe, like my videos, I'd appreciate it. Just throwing it in because I have an extra minute here and I'm not one of these like, subscribe, whatever. If you watch most of my videos, I never mention it. But I could use some subscribers. I could use some likes if anybody wanted to give me some. But that's going to be it for today. This is Matty77 at Bottom Feeders Incorporated. And I hope you have a day.